Hello and welcome to Sit and Chat with Alicia.
And Pat.
I'm your co-host Alicia Wilkerson.
And I'm your co-host Patricia Payne. Thank you for tuning in. Before we begin, we would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who has called us to support us and encourage us. We certainly appreciate it.
We are honored to have as our guest today the Honorable Preston G. Thomas, Chief Judge Pro-Tempore of the 50th District Court in Pontiac.
Prior to his election to the bench, Judge Thomas served as a deputy city attorney for the city of Pontiac, as well as a legislative auditor for the Pontiac City Council. He received his law degree from Wayne State University's Law School in 1982.
Now, what many people may not know is that while Judge Thomas handles his business in the courtroom, handing down sentences and presiding over criminal, civil, and traffic cases, underneath his smile and cool, carefree demeanor that he exhibits, he has been coping off and on with illness for the last 2 years. Let me just say, we have asked Judge Thomas not to disclose the nature of his illness out of respect for his privacy and the very delicate and personal nature of such an inquiry, because what is important is that he is healthy, well, and looking good, thanks be to God.
Exactly. Judge Thomas is with us today to share his story of faith, prayer, triumph, and victory during such a turbulent time in his life. We hope that what he has to say will be encouraging and enlightening to some others who may be facing health challenges.
Judge Thomas will share with our viewers the adversities that he has faced and how his faith and trust in God has given him both the strength and the courage to persevere, and how he is a living testimony of what God and prayer can do. Judge Thomas's story is one of inspiration, determination, hope, and belief.
Judge Thomas, welcome to Sit and Chat with Alicia and Pat. I was curious when we first started out. I don't remember if you were part of Pontiac, but tell us a little something about your childhood, where you spent it up until your college years. What was it like growing up?
I was born and raised here in Pontiac. My mother was born and raised here in Pontiac. My grandfather was one of the first blacks to move into Pontiac.
Really?
Part of the Samples family. My grandfather's name was John Samples, and my grandmother's name was Rosa Samples. At an early age, I was raised in the Bagley and Weston area,
Okay.
with my grandmother.
All right.
So, I grew up knowing Judge Brown
All right.
and the Hatchet family.
Right.
Or I should say, I grew up with them knowing me.
That must mean that they are older than you.
Much older, particularly Judge Brown. And then we moved to the lakeside housing. They were just open. As a matter of fact, the row in front of us and the row behind us was not really completed. And early age, but I remember for the first time we had a bathroom. So I was essentially, most of my young life I was raised on the south side. And, I'm a product of the Pontiac school system. Graduated from Pontiac Central.
Yes, go Chiefs!
1965. I went to work at General Motors. And, during the turbulent 60s, the General Motors was very progressive at that time. I was chosen to be a member of the Operation Opportunity Program.
Is that right?
And this was to get, minorities into salaried positions.
Oh.
And it was at that time I met some of my lifelong friends.
Yes.
Judge Bowman was there. He was part of Project Pontiac. Attorney Darrell Mitchell was part of the program. Attorney Kerry Phillips was part of the program.
Okay.
And we used to get together and strategize about what we wanted to do, with our lives.
Right.
So, we had a lot of difficulties and challenges that we had to deal with. So we started making long-term plans. We had decided that that was not the place that we wanted to be, that, we didn't want to retire in that position.
Right.
Because once they got us in there, they kind of left us in there, and there was no room for any type of promotion. So, we all went to get started the school together. We all went to Oakland University. We made up our minds that we wanted to become attorneys and judges, and we were going to change the world.
All right.
So we all went to Oakland University, and we all graduated Oakland University. We did well. Then we went to our respective law schools.
Uh-oh.
And then we started this journey. Judge Bowman and I decided at an early stage in our schooling that we wanted to become judges. So, we started that journey. And, here we are today.
And that's really good, Judge Thomas, because as you've indicated, the plants, so many people migrated from the south to the north because they heard about the jobs, the opportunities that were available for blacks, especially in the north. And they did. They migrated north here, and many did end up in the plants. I know both my father, my grandfather, even my husband, they ended up in the plants. And it's funny that it seemed like so many people, once they were there, it was the end all for them. They stayed there, which the plants were great. They supported a lot of families, took care of us. However, it's good to know that even during that time that there were young men and young women who wanted to do even more and make a difference. And that's really great, Judge Thomas.
It is true, and it seems like you guys formed a pack.
Well, we supported each other.
Right.
Because, we had good days, we had down days. We had some days where, we weren't really sure of ourselves, so we really supported each other. And, we helped each other to get through.
So you formed a brotherhood, it sounds like to me, Judge
Yes, we
Thomas.
did. And we've been friends ever since.
And that's a blessing in this day and age to have lifelong friends. You've been together since the beginning, and you know what struggles you went through. You know what it took, the blood, sweat, tears, and prayers, of course, it took for you to get to where you are today.
Now, it was a leap of faith because I spent 10 years there.
Is that right?
10 years. And, when I left, I had plenty of misgivings because, I was married and had a family. And it was like, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket. So failure was not an option. Because I remember, walking across that stage and graduating from law school. All my family was there. When I say all my family, I don't mean my immediate family. I mean aunts and uncles, all of them. Because I was essentially the first one in the family to graduate from college.
That's
And to go on to law school. And the support that they gave me. And another thing that I realized early on, when you're trying to do something, people will help you.
Yes, they will.
And, your support and help will come from sometimes some of the strangest places. And I want to give kudos. Freddie Core, who was a friend of my family. I was clerking for Attorney Albert Hatchett. And I was going through one of those periods where I had scraped up enough money to pay my tuition. I was in law school, but I didn't have enough money to buy my books. And, without your books, you might as well not be there.
That's so true.
And I was walking from my car to the office, and Freddie Core was going in at the same time. And he said, he says, I've been meaning to talk to you. He said, I heard what you're doing. He says, I know it's not easy. He says, and I'm going to give you some help.
Wow.
And he reached in his pocket, and he gave me some money that was $10 short of what I needed to pay for my books.
See how good God is?
Always
See
has
how
a ram
good-
in the
and
bush.
Always a ram in the bush, and the Lord can work in so many mysterious ways.
Yes.
And that was something you weren't even expecting.
I was not expecting it. I was agonizing over that because, we were we were going into our second week of classes. And I still didn't have any books. And it was like, where there's a will, there's a way.
That's right.
But too, Judge Thomas, I'm sure that it made you feel good to know he was watching you. You had no idea of that, and that's why it's so important. And I know that Sister Payne and I have talked about this. You never know who's watching you. So that's why it's very important to carry yourself in the best light that you can, because you never know. Someone could be watching you, and they could do something to really help you. And anyone who's been to college knows, if you get behind 2 or 3 weeks in college, in your classes, that can be a problem.
You're playing catch up for the
rest of the
The rest of your
semester.
life.
So that is wonderful. Isn't that something?
How did you find out that you were ill? And what were your first thoughts when your doctor gave you that bleak prognosis?
A couple years ago, I was going through some issues. Judge Bowman had ascended to the circuit court, and I found myself in the position of a chief judge unexpectedly. And Judge Bowman was in the middle of a lot of things that I wasn't really involved in, and I inherited those. So, I was dealing with that. Then, my wife had health issues. And so I was dealing with that, then I was dealing with some employees. So, to make a long story short, I was mad all the time. All the time. From the time I got up to the time I went home, I was angry about something. So, I started having these stomach aches. So, it got to the point where I started medicating. I'd go to the drugstore, and get Maalox, and I'm drinking Maalox out the bottle. And my wife is continuing telling me, you need to go see about it. Well, you know how we do it.
Yes.
We get hard-headed sometimes. It's like, I'm not going to see no doctor. I'm not doing this.
That's common among men.
So she did what she always does when there's health issues and, she's not getting her way as it relates to, us following her directions. She called my son, who is a doctor.
Okay.
So he got on my back. So he just went on and made an appointment with some doctor that he knew. He set up the appointment, and told me to be there. Okay, to get everybody off my back, and get them quiet down. I agreed to go. So, my wife went with me to essentially make sure that I went, So I go to the doctor, and, he was a pleasant guy. We talked, and I told him what was wrong. I thought at most I was probably getting an ulcer, That was my diagnosis.
Yes.
So he set me up for a number of tests, and I took the tests, then I had another appointment with him to go over the results of the test. So, I really expected him to say something like I had a sour stomach, or, I had beginning ulcers or something, to that effect. But, what he told me, really caught me off guard. Because, he told me, he said if I had waited another 6 months or so, he said I wouldn't be here. And he also said that, there was nothing that they could, really do. So, needless to say, that was a strange ride home because, I'm sitting there, I'm, not really saying anything because, I'm trying to wrap my mind around all of this. And my wife is going a mile at a minute.
And I was going to ask you, what was Mrs. Thomas's reaction and your family when you shared to them the news?
Well, she was there. She heard it for herself.
Okay, well, that's how we do. We want to be there.
And, she's, the Lord this and the Lord that and the Lord this and the Lord, and the Lord did it for me, and, the Lord can do it for you. And I'm thinking, I didn't say this, but I'm thinking, well, you're a better person than I am. Because he did it for you, what makes you think, he's going to do it for me? I was raised in the church, but I've never been in the church.
I understand.
So, I'm wrapping my mind around this, and it was like, well, what is he talking about? Because I don't feel sick. I've got a stomach ache, what he's telling me just does not mesh with how I feel.
No.
So, to answer your question, I made up in my mind, I said, well, I'm going to be stoic about this.
Of course.
Number one, I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want anybody to know. I'm going to just go about my daily routine like I'm always doing. And, I'm going to do it like my brother did it. I had a brother that passed here, around about that time. And his attitude was like, I don't want nobody feeling sorry for me. I don't want anybody to feel obligated to be, running out here to the hospital. He said that he's had a good life and, he just hoped that he didn't suffer. And he was a real man about it. So I said, I'm going to be a real man about this too.
And I was going to ask you that, Judge Thomas, how did the news affect you emotionally and personally? Because I can only imagine what that's like. That had to be, number one, be a long drive home. And how did that affect you?
Well, actually, it was surreal. I was thinking about it, but it was like I was thinking about it in another sense that, I was thinking about someone else because it was like, it just didn't feel like, this was, in regards to me because I didn't feel ill.
Of course.
You know, and then the thought that, you know, I might not be here, you know, I always felt like, you know, I'll be the last man standing.
You're invincible.
Right.
You're invincible, sure.
Yes.
Right. I've never really been sick before.
Mhm.
So, you know, my attitude was, well, you know, I'll just deal with it. You know, I'm going to carry on, you know, my normal routine. And I'm not going to say anything to anybody. You know, nobody's going to know. Of course, you know, the word started getting out because, you know, first thing my wife did was get on the phone and
Of course.
call my brother, call my sister, call
Sure.
my son, you know,
Mhm.
told everybody. Then when my sister got hold to it, you know, she put me in the prayer list at her church.
Yes.
Then, you know, my name was put in the prayer list at Johnson Memorial, where I went as a youngster.
Mhm.
Then my good friend Reverend Keys found out, you know, and they were praying for me.
Of course.
So then I had a different attitude because, you know, it was kind of humbling. You know, and it really made me feel good to know that, you know, this many people, you know, cared about you.
Of course.
So, you know, I was starting to get cards in the mail, words of encouragement, you know, people letting me know that they were going to pray for me. So that was really uplifting because it was like, you know, I don't have to deal with this by myself. You know, there are people out here that care about you and praying for you.
That's right.
The first time, because I was off twice, the first time, I tried to shop around my medical records, you know, and every time I went to a doctor, you know, once they looked at the medical records, you know, nobody, you know, wanted to touch it.
Right.
So I was on some medication.